皆様お待たせいたしました。
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going into Open Art and Science session, Augmented Sensibility. And first, I would like to introduce the panelists for this session.
Alexis André 様
Alexis André. The latest digital media is applied. Open Real Ensemble and collaboration with Miyake Issei with the different artists. Currently, toy platform Toika was invented by him, and the world new endeavor is being tried. Yoichi Ochiai, Tsukuba University President Assistant and visiting professor of Osaka Arts University. As a media artist, he has been quite active overseas in Japan and presented with different awards. Now Tokui. In 2009, he established Qosmo, AI and interactions with the human beings, and he is exploring the possibility of augmentation, and music videos are being produced with the support of music and back-to-back interactions with AI. And this DJ performance is provided not only here in Japan but also overseas. Shunichi Kasahara. 2014 and onwards, Sony Computer Science and Laboratories, he joined that Laboratories. Control of eyesight by computer and the research has been developed so that the technology can be implemented in society. I would like to introduce the moderator, Sony Computer Science Laboratories, the director and president, Mr. Kitano, a Loftwork representative of the company, Chiaki, Hayashi, will serve as the moderators. Mr. Kitano. This is the second session, and now we are going to talk about augmented and sensibility. The two speakers are going to make presentations, and first, Alex André is going to make the first presentation, which will be followed by Mr. Ochiai. First, André. Alex. I have no problem with the Japanese, so allow me to speak and make a presentation in Japanese. Well, sometimes asked what kind of person I am. I am a French person. I am proud of that. And originally I am an engineer. So I do a lot of things, but I was not interested in that, so I switched to a different world. Researcher is my main job, and I'm doing some research, but at the same time, now I am a crappy video game maker. So some people know myself as a crappy video game creator, but I will not talk about that today. Leo Oxman's picture, the schema, art and engineering should be both in polar and design and science as well. Is it clear? In the center, what is it? It is very interesting. This is something where I would like to focus on. The combination of science and design and engineering and art, how are they going to be combined together? The objective is to think about the future of a play. The future, the people in the future need an interesting time, and aside from job, well, they want to be entertained. Now, my play is I'm somewhat masochistic in some sense, and starting in January 1st this year, every day I'm trying to create one animation a day, even if I am drunk and even if I come back home very late, I create something like this. And after the reception, I am so drunk, but I created this. Now take time to think about it. Now I fell asleep, and then I found this kind of a drawing when I woke up. So this is my entertainment. This is my challenging task, and I try to complete that. So I have to create something every day. In the past, this is something I most like. I like best. So new creations every day. You have to cheat something because you can't create something from nothing. You have to rely on something that already exists. The color patterns which I like, and then I do not select each color. I don't do that because my dress is full black, but I'm a color lover. And then in this way, there are different colors and bright ones included. And then I didn't choose them, in fact. I didn't choose any colors. You can see the coding of some color. So whatever color. So this is a function that is a given. So this shows my version of augmented sensibility. I don't want to think about which color to be selected. So I invented this system. So this is the scheme arrangement. If there is a photo, and then you are going a pretty color palette is going to be generated in the process. So this is very interesting. This is interesting because it is automatic. If you put in or input a photo, you will a new color is generated. Color is something that is already done for me. And so if you have a photo and a picture, there are specific colors, and then moving on to the next task. The things need to be made easy because that is very important for me. And so automation. Now, machines produce something, and then you may think that the products have no soul in themselves. But there should be action in the first stage. For me, there should be a combination of beautiful colors, I believe. Therefore, the emotion or senses that are captured in this stage, omoiro, that the colors that you prefer in Japanese. So this is the system that I collaborated with Issei Miyake, and the different colors are selected and automatically producing a color palette. Now this is Yamai-san, who is the main designer, selected those colors and they form the base, and the palette is generated. And with this in use, I realign them in the colors I like. And then in the project, the project was to produce a bag in this way. So bag itself carries a value as a fashion item. It is made of good, pretty texture, and the coloring is wonderful. The story is given by me. Now, this bag, it is very good. But if you know the story behind it, you would probably like to talk with me. For example, the stained glass color is used or modulated, emulated, excuse me. And so these colors worked very well. And then these bags and those the men waiting for their wives coming over to them. That is the photo that formed the basis. And then the four major cities, London, New York, Paris, and Tokyo, those photos were used in order to produce different items. And in the Ginza shop, as you can see, they are displayed. Memories of slicing trips are recorded in this way. What I would like to say is that New York and London and Paris, and they are still displayed, but the things about Tokyo, they are all gone and were sold out. Because Tokyo ones are colored with red. And there were those buyers wanted to buy Tokyo ones, but the value for underlining the product, that the value of Tokyo is incorporated into that. And that was made possible because of auto generation. If a designer's will is going to be incorporated, and that would be a different story. But with this kind of automatic generation system, that the memory and the story, they can be abstracted. And that is the importance and the value of auto-generation. That is something I have been trying to produce. I want to lower my burden because it has to be produced every day, and so I want to make it a fun part, make it a fun thing. The PC should be used for lowering my burden. For example, in this way at Shibuya, and Sony runs this signage. And this is a testing video. I was wearing blue shoes, and the blue, it was picked up. And then the time and the watch and shows that the same color. Therefore, I was there at that moment, and so the clock showed that color, and that is how it was produced. Therefore, the content can be produced depending on who is on the spot. Every day, every evening, I am working on this. So what I would like to produce is that entertainment that fits each individual with the help of auto-generation. Now, another project I would like to talk about here, the same method, in fact, your own toy or your own character. When you're a child, that the children play with those characters like a police officer and a thief. And then 5 years old, you quit that kind of play because it is not any more interesting. But the imagination should be further stimulated in this way. So if that kind of a character is going to be given a bad guy or a good guy or a runner and chaser and the runner, and that kind of a role is going to be used for the play. A metaphysical story, in a certain sense. So this is the toy platform. That is the idea that underlines a toy platform. Toyo is something that comes out of my research, and we have those members in the core team. So it is not a three-man project, but we are going to try to incorporate our passion into the toy. Please look at this video clip. Toyo's cube responds to action, synchronized, operated, simple robot. Make, play, make, play, and click. These talents and the children were good performers, laughing so well. And then the toy was really interesting and fun for them. So what plays the key here in this Toyo? That the character everyone loves and can be put on the cube. For example, Ultraman or Doraemon, and they can put on the cube and for fighting. It would not come up on the market usually. So in this way, the world that children would like to realize can be realized. I think this has been pursued and starting in 2013. What is good play or fun play? I have a 5-year-old kid, and then for him, what would be a good play that would stimulate growth? Now, if you are going into just to receive something that is already existed, instead of that, if you're going to participate from the very beginning, it is going to be very interesting. So at the starting point, I think is determined, and the process can be imagined by children. That is more interesting, and the technology support is going to be given in this way. Now, toy reality, we have to understand and grasp what is going to happen. What is the role to be played by what toy, and what would be the end result. And this sensor, the sensor is going to capture all that data. And for example, police officer chasing a thief, and then if the police officer touches a thief, and that can be a rule. And then that rule can be materialized with the support of motors. And 5 years ago, well, this is something I came up with, and this scenario has not been changed at all. So if you have a toy that you like, you are going to give a new role or a behavior to that toy. That is what Toyo means. And another point is that children will be able to play with those toys, and those toys can be evaluated whether good or bad or strong or weak. Now, children can play with the Legos, and then something that is produced out of Legos, you can tell and evaluate whether they are strong or weak or bad or good. But with this in Toyo, you can give evaluation. That means the children can play with something that is created, and then that would give the clicks or intuition, because children would like to improve the function. So the mindset of people who who want to save the world, that kind of mindset is going to be created. children can do something, can add something in order to improve the function. Debugging, in other sense, can be achieved in this way. That means, well, the value, this is where the value of auto-generation exists. If you open up the box, you will be able to get a unique experience and value. Now, AI is a faddish term today. In the case of big data, it is related to the human race. Enormous data, averaged data is required. And then this is going to be a process that is applied to the whole human race. What I would like to produce instead is a system that fits each individual. And then through play, this is going to be created once again. So by designing the process in between, it will make everything more interesting. And that is the value I can offer. This is a conclusion. Machines and AI, we've been talking a lot. And in order to guarantee existence with the human race, how humans are going to make interventions. And that is translated, that can be related into the term empathy. How is this going to be most appropriately translated into in Japanese? So I'm just using empathy. And so how the ultimate state of coexistence is going to be. Entertainment can be used as a tool. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Next, Mr. Ochiai, please. Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Ochiai. Nice to meet you. Today I will talk about digital nature, the value that I see in that. This is one thing I would like you to remember. Jiji Muge is the Japanese. And what it means is the endpoint and endpoint are actually in between the endpoints. Everything is included. So, well, you can actually reach the endpoint without thinking so much about the middle ground. Every endpoint includes the whole, and every process is blah 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 is written there. And actually, this is a poem, Japanese haiku by Matsuo Basho in this old pond. Frogs jumped in, sound of water. This is what Lafcadio Hearn translated this as. Americans typically wouldn't understand anything. Well, there's this translation. This forgotten isolated pond is there, and then there's this frog jumping in, and then, oh, this might be life, this must be nature. So I think this is how it's translated. Now, endpoint to endpoint, the beauty of nature and human emotions are depicted. But how can you really recognize this with only endpoints is a very AI-like question. Now, digital nature is what I have, and so endpoints, the computers, how can actually computers look at the endpoints and generate something aesthetic? This is something that I'm working on. Now, last year in the art festival, there was this installation that I installed. I'm a media artist, so basically I'm creating things that are cyber, but typically locations would be old schools, and this area, actually, because of depopulation, there are new unused schools that are already vacated. And typically, I would be doing this installation in summer vacation period and put my things there. And there's this sunlight coming in. And in this very sunny classroom, I put my installation. And what was dripping is this machine that makes the balloons, and then I made this creation that projects this image of a butterfly. And one thing is this is very transparent. However, there is this picture, and so it's so bright, and still, how can you see the image is a question. And actually, ultrasonic speaker is behind there, so there's this oscillation, and this light beam is emitted at a certain speed. And so digital, it makes it possible, but it doesn't really look digital. And how to make something like this is my challenge. And normally, computer research or computer graphics is my area of research. So this is what I do. And what about the frequency and what kind of light distribution is the optimum? So I think about that in terms of CD and then make that into a physical phenomena. And so that is a typical process I take. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. Nice to meet you all once again. I am exposed in various media, construction, journals, Nature Index. I was on the cover page, but that was a surprise. But I teach in a college, and there are 43 students in my lab, and there are some researchers there. And I'm in that photo, and I run my companies as well. So total about 50 members. Working to create some new world or develop new products. And they're actually put into large companies, or we develop our own in our own company. And waves, and also digital fabrication and deep learning are some of the areas that we work in. And the characteristics of our work is that something that looks new typically is something complicated. Is it a projector? How can you let the light oscillate, and what is the tuning that is necessary? Well, humans, waves, and the materials, how can you make this feedback loop is the biggest challenge. So throughput is the subject of design. It's not just one element, but throughput. What does it mean? The throughput, that is really the focus and our characteristic. And let's say a surface reflection of a display is often our focus. And so what is the formula? What about the data? And how can we make hologram from that data is one thing that we might think. And what can humans' eyes see, but maybe cameras cannot see? So these optical questions. And there are a lot of smartphones used in taking photographs that are illegal, not supposed to be taken. So I was asked to develop something that is a pattern and have this kind of an image. And background for me is media art. So I looked at the history of media of humans. And so this is an ongoing process. But then on the extension, how can computer be used? What about this turning zoetrope? Maybe a 3D printing machine that actually can actually interpret dancing. Maybe a 3D dancing musical score is something that we try to store. And by using computer, you can make it automated. And so that's one thing that we have been looking at. So the endpoint would be, what is a smartphone or head mount? Would it be head mount display? Well, in the 2010 or in this decade, this is something that we are wondering about. And I always call these guys sonic internet natives. These dolphins, when they're actually underwater, they can actually communicate with each other with sonic capabilities. So they have been doing this for a long time in 3D recognition based. And this is a question that I'm asking myself. So some things that we don't see or cannot see, but there are certain things that can be leveraged for or harnessed for communications purposes, for instance. So how can we manipulate or use space, for instance, maybe something that moves on its own? In other words, how can we synthesize certain things and have some structure, invisible structure in space? So what we hear, you have the resolution of the eyes and resolution of your ears. So these are the sensory capabilities that we have, but we want to go beyond that. Maybe something that is higher in terms of the resolution, something holographic, something that we can use to control shapes and the waves that are emitted. And Dr. Rekimoto's group, actually, I used to study there. And so supersonic waves, maybe you can make something of a certain shape, although it's not visible to the eyes, and maybe you can use that for manipulation. And also the volume of the physics that comes into play is something that is so small that people don't notice. And this is a tweezer that I often used, and this is more recent development. The red circles, that's the area where the sound is heard, and only in that area. The point here is 3D space. You have freedom, and then let's create the speaker function in that area. And then the supersonic portion actually make sure that humans can pick up the sound in that particular location. And then you can have two circles. Maybe you can hear Japanese from one side, English from the other side, and so on. So what I have been doing is that something that has made virtual and materialized. Why don't we look at both and have a combination or the merging of the two? And this is something that I have been working on. And I, focus on this freedom of going back and forth between material and virtual, and laser is what we often use. And this is femtosecond laser, 100 trillion. 1/100 trillion second, and then the peak energy is so high, but then the average is very low. So very low energy, but plasma is made, and then you make that plasma, and what do you do with it? Things that people couldn't feel. And I have been developing these figures, and the focus here is there's this laser against this plant, and energy is so small, and you can draw a picture in this space, and you actually touch it, and your finger will not burn, but it will react like that. So it's before we recognize it as sound or light. This is infrared, and then using that area hologram, and so that we can convert that invisible to visible. Visible light is very narrow range. Where we can see is very limited, and so I'm interested in how we can synthesize this kind of throughput, and replanning is done. We collect the data and have a machine intelligence, and then place it on the interface and have this experience and try to invent throughput. And then I am interested in finding something new. As a result, art, research, methodology, and design are the areas that I operate in. When I am working on arts, my thinking is more simple. What sort of visual art I want to realize. In case of Roppongi Hills, on the 52nd floor of this building, in the media event last year, I had that artwork. And this 300 global 360-degree spherical picture image is what I like very much, and I was thinking maybe I could actually attach this image of the Earth on the surface of this sphere, and I was successful in doing that, and I was so gratified, and so that was really a good experience. And in the meantime, what about the algorithm for balancing some object in air? And for it to move freely, what would be the optimum formula? And so the shape is not so important, but something that has a certain shape, I want it to move freely in space. And this is actually a commercial on TV that I appeared in person. And the same process, 3D printing, and then the outer shape is made intricately, and this is Fujifilm's commercial. And well, I made that special effort, but people don't really notice that. And this kid is not smiling because he was too worried that it might fall. Anyway, this was a commercial that I did with this levitated object. So why do we do this? End-to-end wave or shape or material, how can we transform these things is what I'm looking at. So waveforming in supersonic. Actually, this dolphin. Waveforming is possible with dolphins. But in our lab, 3D printing is used, and we are making some structures. And then, so by having that in your brain, and then you sort of warp it, bend it. And 3D printing, electrical control is also used, and also biological approach is also taken. And I think in the future we can do this automated using AI. So we're still in the process of working on this. Something like a muscle, 3D printing or 3D printed thing might move like this, just like muscles. 3D patterns might be embedded, and then as a structure, how would it move? And do an optimization calculation for automation. Or this is quite difficult. It's easier to see, but it's actually difficult. The actuator has to be designed so that the bunny's ears will move like that. What about people's arms? So you have a certain rhythm, different rhythms, right hand, left hand, and then you have this motion capture, and the electrical stimulus is applied to the human arms as well. And then, well, it's interesting that you input this signal to the arm, will remember that. And then after the signal is emitted, actually for a while the arms remember that. So you can maybe develop radio-controlled humans. And the data that you gather as a result, you put in as input data and figure out what might come out of that. And you don't need to do any optimization. You just put it into the Excel sheet and work on it. What I am thinking is what we're recognizing with our brains or our minds. We're seeing the world as is, but we can see only those visible lights. But there are areas that we cannot see beyond our sensory regions, sensible regions. And I'm trying to think about those non-sensible areas. This is interesting. Natural science, we used to think based on what we see with our own eyes. But in the future, in the digital nature, you actually use a computer and collect data. And what was interesting recently is this Fourier transform in deep learning. There was a problem. And single year was the solution. And this fully connected neural network does this calculation. Maybe 50 years or so have passed since Fourier transform was discovered, and then we have this fast speed Fourier transform now. And can I write a paper on this? No. Fourier transform is faster, but neural net or network, actually solving it like this, it's an interesting theoretical discovery for me. And end-to-end was the term that I started with, so I would like to conclude with that as well. There's a favorite fashion brand of mine, this brand. I am wearing that as well, and there's this embroidery on the back. And so this is the brand that I like. And they're geniuses, and they make a lot of collection. And I was thinking deep learning can be used for coming up with a new collection. And I thought this is really interesting. So you make a pattern, cut the fabric. That's a typical process. And then you have that learned by the machine. And then you place orders in the human patterners and the people who make it. And then can you tell which brand this belongs to? Is the question I asked the avid fans of the different brands. And my brand versus deep learning creation and other brands. Those that are avid fans know which one it is. The deep learning version and the original ones, there's no distinction possible. And well, that was interesting. So end-to-end or endpoints, we're looking at the endpoints. And the conversion from one endpoint to the other, the machine learning can do this easily, and maybe high order creation and also low order creation. I think you can do that with sound and what I'm interested in most is, because I am from the Orient, I'm from Asia, so you have, rather than having something one piece, one object, but rather an ecosystem is what I would like to focus on. Not language, but phenomena is what I would like to elucidate. Now, the beauty or aesthetics in Japan is very unique. This is a Japanese term meaning the mountains are actually hazy, the waters are clear. And why hazy is beauty in Japanese, and I try to explain to the Greek people why this is considered beautiful, and it's a matter of resolution. I think blurred is lower resolution and clear water is higher resolution, and a computer might support that kind of a resolution difference in how we think of things as beautiful. So that was quite interesting. Thank you.
Ochiai様、ありがとう。
Professor Ochiai, thank you very much. And Mr. André, thank you very much. So we are going to have a discussion time. Speakers and moderators, please come onto the stage. Thank you. So I think who should speak first? And I think I'm on the loser side. I think very interesting two talks, and Kasahara-san and Tokui-san are doing very fun things as well. Now, how the theme is going to be, augmented sensibility is supposed to be the topic, but perception augmentation, rather than that, for instance, what was very interesting when it comes to Alexis' presentation is that the designers' subjective idea not incorporated, that the patterns are generated from landscape or the cityscape, and usually the designer has to have an intervention there. The design that is designed by the designer, but that portion is not incorporated into Alex's presentation or ideas, and which gave me a lot of a strong impression. Of course, other aspects as well. When it comes to Professor Ochiai's presentation, and technology is going to incorporate different kinds of technologies, and in this way, never experienced things or a phenomenon is to be generated. For example, colloidal display. If you take a look at it in the photo, it doesn't hit me, but if you see that in motion, that you will be surprised at different kinds of technologies that are combined together to realize that motion. And so instead of augmented sensibility, for instance, I think there was a talk about the world concept or the perspective. So the perspective that has never experienced is now being translated into reality. I think from that viewpoint, very interesting. Instead of goods, but ecosystem is to be created, and I concur with that kind of a concept. And what's the common thread across the two presentations is that when it comes down to Alexis' one presentation, that you look into the process, and I think that is a part of the new process or frontier that we are creating. That the Loftwork, which they incorporates different kinds of new designers. Well, before that, Alexis and Ochiai-san made the two presentations. I think Nao-san and Kasahara-san are on the stage. Therefore, maybe including self-introduction, would you say a few things? Alexis and myself are very the ones that are very down-to-earth type of personality, but those two persons are quite cool in their approach, and the social critique and visually very appealing. So I really admire those two persons. They are deep learning specialists, and they have a good knowledge. And Kasahara-san is such a cool person as well that he can simultaneously take care of 20 projects at the same time. I'm older than him because I came back to the lab after I started work. Visual augmentation and the senses augmentation are the areas that we have been studying. For example, multiple viewpoints to be owned by human beings or telepresent. Another viewpoint and to be owned by human beings, and then such experiences are to be followed by others. He is such a super cool researcher. I'm not type of researcher. Ochiai-san, you were really straightforward today, and thank you for your introduction. And the Kasahara-san's the pieces which we did not fully understand, that in the session of Augmented Body, there was a lot of talks about internet viability and augmented body and others. What I would like to ask here is the inner layer. Now, when we start talking about all those matters, you find it pleasing, happy, or pretty. Do you think whether that kind of a concept, the feeling can be enhanced or not, whether we have been created, and when it comes down to augmented body, the input is clear and the output is also clear. But when it comes to aesthetics, we can easily say that as a result of augmentation, 100 times more beautiful. It is difficult to say. Would you please elaborate on that aspect, including the self-introduction? The technology is to be employed in order to increase or enrich experiences. But speaking of augmentation and augmented body and sensibility research, how technology is going to enhance perception, transform perception of human beings, whether it is augmentation or not. Well, I have been long involved in this, and at this point, I'm at a loss whether it is related to augmentation. Well, that was such a discussion in the previous session. What I doubt here at the moment is that the perception of a self, how fragile it is. This is something I have keenly recognized. And for example, that the things I strongly feel about is something that is the one that I really feel very close to. So if the preconditions are going to be removed, then augmentation process is going to be reconstructed. So like sensibility and the things you feel inside yourself, whether technology is going to transform that or not. I think we are approaching that timing. The theory of evolution has also been transformed in that way. For example, that a human being, or that instead of an animal stretching out for a food, it is not just like that. It is not only a matter of one specific species. Now, speaking of the theory of evolution, I think the Japanese translation is wrong. Now, speaking of evolution, there are supposed to be species in evolution which are supposed to be defined that are superior to the previous species, but that is not the case. It is a matter of adaptation. In other words, there are genetic transformations in order to adapt to the changing environment. So in some specific environment, the system is going to be more complex, but that complex system does not automatically mean that simple systems. Now, with the specific and the complex system in place, that those species can survive. And there are a lot of species that do exist without the presence of human beings. Now, when it comes to mammals, if you're going to compare cats and human beings in terms of the figure, cats are more beautiful. I think, in my own belief, the cat stands at the top of the evolution tree. Okay, anyway. That human-centered approach of evolution, and that is a crap in a certain sense. I like dolphins better. Dolphins are better. Dolphins are better than human beings. Look neat. In my case, the strawberries are better. The sweetness, and then I think for those who can't see the light, that the color is not red, just gray. The strawberries have the color that attracts human beings.
It's almost superhuman. Actually, strawberries may have evolved to cope with people's taste. Maybe there has been genetic manipulation, and also, of course, that's true for cats as well. Iriomote Yamaneko might be the original one, but it's a matter of adaptation, adapting for the sake of survival. So, but as species, dog is one with the largest variety. You have small size to bigger size. That is maybe 20 times difference. If that was the case with elephants, 20 times bigger elephants might be huge. Well, so coping with the environment that is suitable for human beings, right? So, and the mixing of the varieties, yes, to cope with what is needed by humans. Yes, I think it was easier for them to survive. So once a year, the animals are in the human arena, I think there are different strategies for survival. Well, dogs and cats, actually, I think they're positioned higher in this hierarchy in the world than humans. Yes, because cats, we serve cats. They don't serve us, but we serve cats. So what cats are doing, just eat, sleep. Yes, and yes, I think koala is at the very top of the hierarchy. Koala bears. Because they don't move. They want humans to eucalyptus leaves to be brought in front of them, right in front of their face. And there was this crowdfunding service that I was involved in, and there was this paper made of the feces of koalas, and then you pay 10,000 yen for that paper, and then there's this 500 yen thanks letter from the developing countries, but in return for this the paper made with the feces of koala bear, and I was thinking maybe crowdfunding is art in itself. Koala feces we're talking about. Well, when they're eating eucalyptus leaves, maybe they're almost like junkies. So our senses, human senses, may have changed, but maybe not evolved for the better. We just call it change rather than evolution or progress. AI and me doing DJ together, back to back. And when I did that, I tried to have the machine or learn my style. And also, the recording of past DJs were actually learned by the AI, so that the AI will select the right music. And then AI would give us a solution that is very much expected. In other words, it is within the expectation boundary, so to speak. And it was not interesting at all. And then, so the past data of DJs, human DJs in the past, just get rid of that. And I just had the AI choose freely. Based on sound, pure sounds alone. And then they came up with some unexpected choices of music. So I play techno music, and then typically a human DJ would play another techno or in-house music. But there was this rehearsal where the machine selected jazz after my techno song, and that was really cool. And I was very much surprised. And the reverse actually happened in the real thing, not the rehearsal, but the real event. AI, well, actually chose the techno music that I played in rehearsal, and I actually thought I played the jazz, and I put the wrong side of the record, and it just ended up like a very crappy disco. But anyway, mimicking people is not the way. I think we talked about change, so maybe having this offsetting, so to speak, not to be on the extension, but the axis may be shifted a little bit, or making it a little bit far, a little bit close, not a straight line. Yes, I like that, because I don't like semantics. What does it mean? I hate that. AI, semantics. I don't like using AI for learning or having the AI. Well, the wave can be learned as is. Waves and waves, how they are converted, or the image to image, what transformation is done is what I'm interested in. That's possible now. And the meaning of language or words and this conceptual space, when you do mapping, it's not so neat. Semantics, Kojevsky and others are working on this semantics or language. Basically, it's about language. And map is not territory. It's a very well-known phrase. We're talking about the language. And that's the limit, the boundary. And then once it's turned into a word, that's the end of the story. And also there are cultural contexts attached. In the past, we had no other option, so we had to use it. But deep learning breakthrough is that you can do many things without really going through that process of semantics and the meaning of words. And I think that's really key. Okay. But still, the data that is inputted, there will be some bias, right? Words are very cultural in nature, and therefore what people associate with that word will differ depending on the cultural background of that person. And then you input information such as not words, but the situation, for instance, and then something comes out as an output. But it's not words. So we're now able to have this non-word, non-verbal input. However, the data that is input today, will it still have the cultural context, global culture AI? Will there be something like that? Well, I think on the average, you cannot avoid this linguistic or language-oriented bias. So it would be human race having that bias. Well, let's say you have the word house, and then the image in terms of color. Alexis' case, I think a typical Japanese house might be brownish in color that people will think about. But Spanish might think when they hear the term casa, it would be white, blue sky. So they would associate these colors. So these are the different contexts. And once it is translated, it's already different. But living is a function, and so the functions are not that different from one culture to another. And so it's important, it's impossible to describe all these differences, but without words, we cannot really communicate practically. And in France, there's a singer, or rather actor, who cannot hear. He's hearing impaired by birth. And this person, until he learned hand signs, the order in terms of time, like after today comes tomorrow, he couldn't tell. But then he was able to learn this hand signs, and then he was able to think logically. And there's a translation of his book anyway. So I think this is very useful, and that's a good use of the language. But there is always bias. Yeah, it's very difficult to use no languages anymore. And I always try not to use any language or words, but it's hard. I think we're helped and supported by words and language. Jijimugen is the term that you used, but when you leave things that are not understood as is, you feel really uncomfortable. So you want to be convinced, at least basically. So deep learning. Well, you have something that cannot be described in words. Something is like that is happening, and however, we want to actually translate things into words so that we can be convinced. Don't think, just feel is the kind of phrase that we often hear, but just feel. Why do you think the things that you feel is my question. You have something that the machine can tell you, and then you are convinced and you think that you're okay, but maybe I think AI today has those two layers. I think I understand what you are saying, but human capability of understanding, I think AI can actually go beyond that level, and we cannot really explain as humans why deep learning came up with this or came up with this answer. I think that is really interesting to me. So in other words, this is something that is new or not, at least not expected.
But human beings cannot imagine what others do. So whether AI comes, what AI comes up with, we don't know. So, for example, that the interactions with the AI, the robots' interactions and the conversations, and when they are not connected, there is no function. Anyway, that when it comes to human conversations, whether they are viable or not, in most cases, not so. Well, the people are talking to each other without any persuasion and understanding. And I think that's what we have experienced on the stage. And if it is going to visualize whose message has been misunderstood or not, I think what is good about human beings is that even without understanding, in whatever situation, human beings can be flexible in making responses, but machines do not. Therefore, so even if the machines can go beyond human beings and capability, we can still adapt to that new world, because we can come up with the ideas. When it comes into language, it is a prism or the unique lens. It is a digital one. It is separated. And in that way, that we can have inspiration through using language. And if it is going to be too logical in terms of language, it is just a simple repetition of programming. If you're going to write a thesis or an article, it is going to be logical. Otherwise, we behave like dolphins, because you can just come up with the ideas instantly and comments. If you feel, and then you think, and you're going to write it down, and then you can sort them out. Now, if there are going to be 50 people who do not understand the language in lab, well, any action by others is going to be defined as a terrorist act because they don't understand the language. Probably they don't. The people in the audience do not understand fully. Tokui-san, any comment on this topic? That is difficult. What I would like to say here is that the process that has been tuned with the language, we have to break that down in the first place. What is interesting is Safra-Oppius hypothesis, whether language constrains the thought. Well, depending on, according to several surveys, that is judged and so. For example, there are different kinds of spectrums of the blue color. And then if you're going to separate them into 5 different colors, and then if they are going to be interviewed by showing those colors, and then they can select and pick one color. If there are only going to be 2 colors when it comes to blue, for example, in the primitive culture society, but even if you do not have many bluish colors, the answer can be more correct. If there are going to be separated the colors, that have to be, interpretation has to be made in the language in the first place. And so once there is such interpretation done, the original meaning is going to be lost in the process. Therefore, the language is going to be serve as a bias. For example, that no one remembers and memorizes telephone numbers because a smartphone can do that work on behalf of the users. So we can have more room to do other things. The language itself is going to have constraints. And from language into phenomenon. If you're going to express something instead of language, the expression can be achieved. Yes, I think so. It is an auto-encoder. Please speak slowly. The dimension reducing tool. Reduce or shrinking, dimension shrinking, or dimension reducing function. Well, we have the audience. I think that it is not a linear language. The dolphin's language is also the same. In 5 years' time, I'm trying to interact with the dolphins. So the sonic sonar is being produced. So dimension reduction tool is necessary. Without a reduction of dimensions, it is difficult to have societal life because it is difficult to form a society because there should be commonality in terms of the interpretation of what is believed to be good. It is the mannish or man-like perception because everything is to be conceptualized. But when it comes to women, without reducing dimensions, just feel it. I think dolphins are similar to dolphins. When it comes to men always try to reduce dimensions. So AI is female-like in some sense. And it is better for for human beings and to behave like a female in order to have better understanding with the AI. So in terms of that capacity, women can have a better opportunity and chance and to understand what AI tries to do. Interactive session is something we would like to pursue in this session. So I would like to open the floor for questions. I don't know if anyone is going to volunteer to ask questions. Well, you can ask just questions as you feel instead of translating them into language. It's just coming out of your cortex, brain cortex, frontal cortex. My name is Kazayama of Tokyo University. I've been engaged in energy research. It's a different topic. There are different energy sources, and the strengthened learning is going to be applied in order to achieve the target. That is the reason why I'm here. And Professor Ochiai was talking about butterfly computation is easily done, and that attracts me. I wonder if there are any other phenomena similar to that. This is going to be presented. Holography is better to be understood by AI. Three-dimensional world is going to be translated into the holograph is going to be 2D and 2D by 2D and 4D. And then if it is going to be input in the AI, parameter can be reduced by 30 factors. I think it is not a good thing to have computation in the Euclid world space. The 3D space should not be recognized as 3D meshes. Instead, holograms. The computer specification is based on the flat or 2D, so it is better for the computer to understand holograms. Fully transformation or the computation, it is easier for computer to understand. That means that conceptually computer is different. Therefore, if it is going to be a 3D space, then it is difficult for the AI to understand. I think the 2D is a bit easier to understand. Holographic, that the brain and cell is like a holographic. I don't know if it is true or not, but that kind of well, when it comes to dolphins, that the holographic, because of the sonic perception, is strong. The serotonin receptors do not exist in the dolphin's brain. So the dolphin's case is very interesting. Input and the output. If the process is unclear, and then the data is to be input in order to create something new. Now, as for holography, input side, the 3D points are to be not to be input. Instead, the holography is going to be used, replace them. Now we have the 3D, the capture, but if it is going to be a different type, then it is easier for the AI to understand. This is something that hits me as well, because we often use the holograms to understand the overall picture.
What I'm doing is that we used to use PID for control, but neural network, maybe the control is actually successful, and that I find very interesting. So going forward, I would like to try something in that area. And Professor Ochiai, do you have any plans of working in that area? Not really, but neural network, once you open it, it's interesting. You know, butterfly calculation, that was interesting. If you open it up, it's interesting. And I thought, I opened it up and I noticed, oh, this is butterfly calculation. I thought, ooh, this is yucky. But 15 seconds and already this calculation is done. But then on a Twitter, somebody from Stanford talked about the single layer Fourier transform was possible. I just found out, and everybody was on the same page. And I thought this process is really scientific. What I mean is, it's not engineering. Engineering is something that you deal with that has been. And that you know, and then you actually solve something that is done for the first time. And there could be an academic society meeting that really praises such accomplishments. Okay, let me intervene here. Holography. It might be easier for people to understand, or might be more efficient. Sound can be holographic. Yes. Were you listening to my presentation? That's holographic. Everything was holography. Everything can be turned into holography. Mr. Tokui, do you also use holography? Not really holography, but sound. So the phase pattern is included in his case. Okay. Well, 22.1 channel microarray, if you start doing something like that, then it becomes different. What I found interesting is that humans see evolution as something linear. You start from primitive stage, and then humans, and then AI. But rather than the linear, as Mr. Kitano said, evolution diverges. It separates out, branches out. And AI is totally different from humans. Maybe we don't need to, or we shouldn't make AI like humans. In other words, AI should have AI-specific processing. Yes, human AI, very human-like. I don't think that's the right way. Well, what's most interesting about AI is creating a new form of knowledge. AlphaGo, deep learning. The Go, this Japanese, this chess match, it was quite interesting. So AlphaGo would actually play the Go in a different manner. So once we saw that play by AI, human Go players were inspired, and the way people actually play have totally become different. And this Lobo Cup soccer game is taking place right now. And actually, I was on the ground and played soccer. And then 7 robots were there, 40 kilograms, 120 centimeters tall. And this is AI type, so they're autonomous. And we play a soccer game. And then it's a soccer rule that they play according to, but 4 meters per second. It's a constant speed, and there's no time lag or anything. If you have any reservation, then they would just catch that. And you have to think constantly, otherwise they will surround you. And so we are playing according to the rules. However, it will be a totally different sports. And so new form of knowledge, once we encounter that, there will be this awkwardness. It will be totally different from what we know as knowledge. And leveraging and harnessing that kind of new kinds of knowledge is important. I don't think human-like AI is not interesting enough. You need to have AI-specific AI. Okay, what I would like everybody to respond to is the following question. Oftentimes, AI is talked about, and robots are talked about, and creativity will stay with humans still, is what often people say. But creativity as well might be discovered by AI, and then the benefits can be reaped and enjoyed by humans. So it doesn't have to be AI that is very human, but rather something that goes beyond human limits, but still creativity by AI, and that can be fed back to humans. And what would be the creativity going forward if that happens is what I would like to ask every one of you. So Kitano-san, you're the moderator, so I will skip you. Okay, maybe I'm speaking too much. Well, anybody else, please. Okay. AI having similar functions as human functions, and then the role of humans will be questioned. And capture. Let's say you have this strange image, and then you're expected to prove that you are humans. And then AI can solve that, and then there can be a lot of spams. And so the question again is, what is human or human beings? and maybe tests to define humans would change. In other words, the definition of humans will change. Yes. So I think there will be more ambiguity as to what makes us humans, the definition of human beings. Language might have been one of the key factors of being human, but that may not be the case anymore. Maybe become a pet of AI. So maybe the cat is ruling the world right now. Maybe people will take the place of cats. Basic income almost. We're actually working for the sake of feeding cats. And so if there's this artificial intelligence that goes beyond human capabilities, maybe humans are no longer necessary. We will face that question. Well, autoencoder is there. It's the kind of question. Okay. The AIs there are contextual, they have histories, and they have autoencoders, and it's kind of strange, so it might be interesting to use them. That's the kind of attitude that humans will have in the future. So why aren't they using wheels? Why? So AI, you're speaking in terms in the shoes of AIs. Yes, humans are on planes, and so AI might wonder why walk with two legs but wheels. Well, I had a walker for my baby, and then actually with the help of the walker, the baby was able to learn to walk faster. Okay, I will listen to the remaining two. Okay. So making music or drawing pictures, paintings with AI, when you think about that, you tend to think in terms of optimization. That's the direction typically. Limited collection of or palette of colors, whether it is pixels or otherwise. You will determine what you can choose and make music that is to the liking of humans. Is it maybe like Bach or Rembrandt? I think it's okay. But if you want to do something truly creative, maybe the space that is actually assumed beforehand as a possible area where solutions can be found, maybe you should question that in the first place. Okay, let me explain the solution. The potential pattern of this solution, you might envision certain area where you expect to find the solution, but that not be the case. And so changing the perspectives. And this is something that artists have typically done in the past. In the past, when photographs were invented, well, people used to draw pictures or paintings as true to life as possible, but then pictures came about, and then the notion changed fundamentally. Okay, Mr. Kasahara, can you close the session? I don't know if I'm the right person to close, but AI and pet, we were talking about that. And what I like or what I find quite beautiful or cool, actually, we used to think that that is something that we're creating those, but as I engage in my research, I'm starting to think maybe that is not our own making. Maybe things that we thought we were creating can be done by computers, or through computational methods. So the senses that leads us to feel something in a certain way, AI can control that. And then there are two things that AI can control. What people find nice will be output by the AI, and then there will be an intervention so that people will feel that something is beautiful or something is nice. So how I feel, how we feel, can be intervened quite easily by AI.
Will save the life and value the life in a drug way. It is an instruction for the player. So into the future, our motion and action is going to be driven by something that kind of override may be made possible. And speaking of the relationship between AI and human beings, that means the area of emotion is going to be reduced. That is okay. There are going to be symbiosis is going to be another level of the world that we will be able to leverage on. Now, thank you very much. We have to bring this session to a close. Thank you very much. And please give the panelists a round of applause. Ochiai-san, Tokui-san, Kasahara-san, André-san, and Kitano-san, Hayashi-san. Thank you. Art and Science session, Augmented